Hello and welcome to the channel. My name's Annalisa and today I'm doing a piece based on Medusa. So Medusa is a legendary figure who has been done a number of different ways. There is the original main stories from Greek legend in, I believe, the Iliad, where someone is sent after her to get her head as part of an impossible quest, because someone wants the person going on the quest to be out of the way so that he can't interfere with some things going on. But I believe Perseus is the name of the person going after her head, and he manages it because of some interference from some gods. And then there is the origin story of Medusa, which is quite old, but I'm not sure if it's as reliable as the Iliad. We have that in its completion, I believe, but the other stories are a little more based on less reliable sources. The main origin story is that Medusa was a woman who was raped by Zeus, and Hera was mad at her instead of at Zeus, and so she cursed her to have hair made of snakes, and that anyone she looked at would turn to stone, or anyone who made eye contact with her or who saw her would be turned to stone. And I'm not sure if in that tale there is that she also has the lower body of a snake, or if that was a detail that was added later. But for various people, Medusa has actually been a symbol of female power. Lately there has been an interest in retelling Greek stories so that they are less sexist and making our own versions. And Medusa has also been used in various tales. I've seen her a number of times just vaguely used as a monster in various tales. And also there is the entire species of Gorgons, which is basically people who are like Medusa that have the hair made of snakes and also the lower body of a snake, upper body of a woman, and their gaze turns people to stone. So I played a video game that had Gorgons in it, and I've also seen them in various stories, and they're pretty cool looking. A lot of them are fairly ugly, and very evil sort of looking, where ugliness and evilness are equated to an extent. It's pretty easy to make someone with hair made of snakes ugly, but I wanted my piece to be one that depicted a Gorgon as being a beautiful, powerful woman who isn't evil. She's just living her badass life being a warrior. So obviously, because of Medusa and the wider category of Gorgon's ability to turn people to stone with their gaze, that could be framed as either defensive or offensive, and also having a lower body covered in scales, and having the snakes on their head, which obviously you can imagine biting someone if they ever got into close combat. They are rather well designed for fighting, and I've always really liked depictions of women warriors, especially with cool armor and cool weapons. So I decided to depict my Gorgon as a warrior. She and her people live in this cave system that she's in, and she is on patrol watching for attackers or invaders, and she is protecting her home. And to do that, she has this I wanted it to be very big, a really big bow, so I gave her, and also a very powerful bow, so I gave her this compound bow, which is what a bow is when it swoops in and out. I think doubles the power behind an arrow, but I'm not sure if it's exactly that. But it significantly increases the power of a bow relative to its length. So you can have a shorter bow that isn't as tall as a long bow, but has a lot of power behind it. And so I gave her this big bow, this big powerful bow, and a side quiver, because I really like hip quivers. I think they're cool. Less often used than back quivers, so I thought it'd be interesting to depict one of those. I also gave her this upper body armor that is less boobylicious than most female drawings of armor, because there's no actual reason for armor to be shaped that way, and it wouldn't be a very good way to do that. You'll notice shows like Merlin, they actually do a really good job of depicting female armor. It's just like male armor, but perhaps a little smaller depending on the size of the woman. I really do like the look of a lot of female armor that's designed not in the most logical way, so instead of just giving her a boring plate or chainmail, I decided to go more with the look of the elvish male in the Hobbit movies, particularly the first one, where the elves that come in riding with Elrond have those really gorgeous breastplates with the gold ribbing or the gold designs on them. So I decided to give that to her because I freaking love how it looks. It's still functional armor. It just would be very expensive and hard to make armor, but when you're not trying to outfit an army, if you have this little elite group, then it would be reasonable. And I do imagine her as more of an elite sort of guard rather than foot soldier. So that's the lore and ideas and story behind the piece. As for the actual painting, this piece I think is one that I've worked on for the longest of any of my pieces so far that I've put on this channel. It took a long time, and I also decided kind of late that I was going to add more detail to the background, and that took a long time and a lot of worrying that I was making it look terrible, because things like buildings and stuff in the background I'm not so great with, and so that putting in the background was kind of worrisome, but I think it turned out really well. I did a lot of fiddling with it to try to get it to look just right, so hopefully it worked. When I was working on her tail here, which was kind of a part that I decided kind of late on that I wanted to put a lot of detail into, I wasn't sure if I was going to do just a little bit of cross-hatching like I did on my mermaid piece to kind of indicate that her whole tail is covered with its scales, but not actually draw all of them. But I decided that it would look better to fill in all of the scales, so I looked at some references of snake scales. Basically most of them are diamond shaped, and they would be more overlapping than these, but if I wanted to not draw each one individually, I had to stick with just plain diamonds. So I came up with this diagonal cross hatching, and I was very nervous about it, but I think it turned out really well on her upper tail and on the curve of her tail, because I wasn't sure if I would be able to make it look like her actual skin scales there were turning with her tail, but I think I actually did manage it by curving the lines around, so I'm really glad that worked so well. The only thing is, when I got done with that, I was so tired and frazzled because it took so long to put in those lines to try to get them to be a good color that they would go with the rest of her scales and just look like shadow and not like lines, and trying to get the curve right, that when I got down to her lower tail I forgot to make them diagonal and made them go straight across her tail, and so obviously they looked more like what do they call it, checkerboard squares down there than proper diamond scales. But if you just focus on her upper tail and the part where it curves, it looks great. I also wanted to add some more detail to her bow so that it would look more like it was engraved, similar to her armor. So on her bow and somewhat on her armor, I used my sparkly watercolor paints that I really like. They work really well. I didn't expect them to be so great because they were like $4 at Fred Meyer's, so they work really well. And so I went over the whole bow with sparkly yellow, and then I went over and put little swirly designs on it in sparkly orange, and that also I think turned out well, which I'm happy about because I was nervous about that. So I only actually put in part of me doing her tail and the bow and the background because by that time I was getting so much footage that it was going to be really hard to boil down and export, so and have room on my camera. So I only filmed parts of those so you could see what I was doing. And then I just did the rest without filming it. On her skin tone, I don't know if it went by too fast for you to see that I wanted her to be kind of darker skinned than most of the characters I've done so far, but also I wanted it to look like she was very much this whole being that was this snake creature and not just like a human part on her top and a snake on the bottom. So I put a green wash over her skin, so you can probably especially see that on her neck and some of her face. And then if there is a green wash on her skin, it probably means that her blood is green, so therefore her lips would be green, so that's why that's the way it is. And then for her eyes, I wanted her to be somewhat animal but also somewhat not, and so green is more of a human color as opposed to yellow, which is a very animalish color. Plus it of course goes with the snakes and the lips. And then, but to give the sort of animal bit, I gave her slit eyes, slit pupil. So you'll see as I'm working on her snakes around her head, putting in the individual faces, you can see in the background some of the stalactites that I've added without filming them. But yeah, so for the little snake's faces, I decided to, I think I put eyes on all of them. I only put mouths on some of them, and some of them had closed mouths so that there wouldn't be so many little red dots around her head. And I think that worked out quite well. And then I gave all the ones that had open mouths at least one tooth, and this one that's kind of bringing his head around and peering out the same direction that she's looking, I kind of I added 2 teeth to, so you could see he was kind of facing forward. I hope you've enjoyed. This is the last in my October Monsters series. If I can manage to get it up today on Halloween, that would be great. Happy Halloween. The original for this piece and also prints and a bookmark version will be on my shop shortly. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!